everyone, welcome back to Doodling Through Education. For my CC students, this is Cycle 3, Week 19, and today is a history video. For everybody else, that just means we're talking about NATO, what this organization is, and why it's important. Before we get started, remember to subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Without further ado, let's start doodling. So, what is NATO? To understand this question, we need to talk a little bit about the history in the world at this time. In 1949, the United States and other Western nations were concerned about communism expanding across the world. After World War II, there was a clear division of sides in the world of groups of countries who were supporters of communism and groups of countries who were not supporters of communism. And the United States, along with its Western allies, wanted to prevent this expansion of communist influence. So in 1947, the United States leaders introduced a plan called the Marshall Plan. And this Marshall Plan essentially provided help and aid to friendly nations to help them to rebuild after war, and it helped them to rebuild damaged infrastructures and even to help them rebuild their damaged economies. Now, at the same time, they were also generally more militaristic toward the Soviets. In February of 1948, there was a coup sponsored by the Soviet Union, which overthrew the democratic government of Czechoslovakia. And unfortunately, this brought that nation firmly into the communist side of that line. This greatly distressed the United States leaders, and so they met and agreed to join in discussions to somehow form some type of agreement with European allies to increase security. Jump ahead a couple months to June of 1948, and the USSR even cut off ground access to Berlin, which forced the United States, Britain, and France to airlift supplies to their separate sectors in this city. So these talks continued, and the Western nations finally finished talking about this and what they were going to do on April 4th of 1949. And on this day, the foreign ministers from 12 different countries in North America and Western Europe gathered in the United States in Washington, D.C. to sign the North Atlantic Treaty. This was primarily a treaty that would increase security, and Article 5 of this treaty stated if a military attacked any of the people who signed this document, any of their countries, this would be considered an attack on everyone. So this helped to discourage the USSR from trying to expand communism into any of these countries. Now, the countries that signed this North Atlantic Treaty make up the original North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, as we know it today. And originally, these countries consisted of Belgium, Britain, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, and the United States. This increased the West's military forces for the next 40 years, with the membership growing even larger over the course of the Cold War era. Greece and Turkey were admitted in 1952, West Germany in 1955, and Spain in 1982. Now, 6 years after NATO was formed, the USSR and its allies formed what's called the Warsaw Pact. And this was sort of a response to the creation of NATO, but it was also in response to West Germany and its addition to NATO in 1955. Really, the USSR was pretty concerned about West Germany being part of NATO, And when talks were brought to the table that West Germany would join NATO, the USSR warned that this would force them to make their own security arrangements. And this was true because when West Germany formally did join NATO on May 5th, 1955, the Warsaw Pact was signed less than 2 weeks later on May 14th. Now, who was part of the Warsaw Pact? It was the USSR, Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. And this remained a constant until the Cold War ended. The Warsaw Pact was similar to the North Atlantic Treaty, but it also gave the Soviets more control over the communist states in Eastern Europe, and it deterred the countries who were part of this pact from seeking greater independence. NATO is still active today. It still provides security for the countries that are involved in it, but it also has a broad range of different crisis management operations, as well as missions, and even civil emergency operations. And that's all we have for today on the topic of NATO. Your homework for this week is to figure out some of the other things that today NATO does and why the United States is a part of it today. And on that note, remember to be kind, follow God's will, and take care. Bye.